stream should be transferred over. If you are on the YouTube box, hey Alexander, let us know that you can hear us. All right. I'm sure you all have the agenda. No major surprises here. We'll go ahead and get started. As far as releases go, what is pending? There's a few things in there that are pending. There's some additional test cases that have been added. I think maybe a network clarification or two. Yes, there was like a simplification in there, which gave a method for doing some gossip validations without using state. Totally not substantive change, but could be a solid way to structure things from the client side. So there's a few things in there. I do expect to do a minor version release, totally non-substantive, with additional tests pretty soon. Call it by Tuesday. So keep your eye out for that. Nothing crazy. Continue refinements in phase 1 and testing on that as well. Other testing items?
So I'm extending Rumor to do chain testing. The idea is to provide these more high-level commands instead of the current, in addition to the current more low-level RPC commands. So we can do things like sync test more easily, and then hopefully as byproduct, it's not a farming joke, we can do some benchmarking and fork choice tests. Because like the current bottleneck really is integration with clients of all these different types of tests that don't fit as well into a client as a unit test. And so if you can reuse the network tooling for that, that would be sweet. And then as audits are coming along and the first results are surfacing, and I want to stay updated with clients. If you have any bugs or things that are being discovered, any feedback for the spec to improve it, please keep me updated.
Thanks, Bruno. Cool. Any other items before we move on? Okay. Testnets next up. I have 2 items in there, Altona and attack nets. I know there's been a flurry of discussion around Altona on the Discord, and maybe some consensus on pushing back Genesis. I don't know if we've actually hit Genesis deposits, min Genesis deposits. Does anybody have the TLDR on that?
Yes, we have reached the minimum number of deposits. We also reached the previously agreed min Genesis time that was yesterday. But we now have the situation that due to some invalid deposits that had to be redone last night, that we have technically a Genesis event happening during the night between Friday to Saturday, or on Saturday, depending where in the world you are. And there is this discussion to move this min Genesis time to Monday, so we don't have to observe this Genesis on the weekend when most people are not available, or not as available as during weekdays. But there's no new proposed Genesis time yet. But other than that, this test is ready to go.
Gotcha. And one of the downsides there is that you are planning on being off starting Monday, correct?
Yeah, but I believe that you will be able to launch this testnet without me. I mean, for me personally, it's very unfortunate, but
yeah,
can't change it.
And what percentage of the validators do you control in the Genesis?
I didn't manage to get any in.
Oh.
I was waiting for the clients to make deposits, and
right.
I'm not sure who's controlling the rest of the validators, but I didn't manage to get any in. So it's probably fine.
Okay. So we're essentially deciding on a delay from what, like 8 hours ago?
What do you mean 8 hours?
The min genesis time, or like the genesis. I guess we're just deciding on a time at this point.
Yeah, I think min genesis time was Thursday, so this is today. Yeah, 8 hours ago, right?
Yeah. Okay. So we're just deciding on an offset from that.
Yeah. So probably just what is this? 4 days.
Right.
Friday. Yes. Just to Monday.
Okay. I know before I went to bed last night, there was a proposal of adding 72 hours, which made it 120 hours offset, but that was also before the trigger was actually hit. Does anybody have a proposal right now, or do we want to just take it to the Altona chat right after this call?
I think we can take this offline.
Yeah, okay. Let's reconvene quickly after this call in the Altona and toss out a couple of times. Great. Okay, I circulated a document about attack nets. The intention here is to create a specific text net. Altona is probably more of a dev net. Attack nets for developers, attack nets are for attackers, and test nets would be largely for users. The distinction here is for, I think most of the users don't really care about attacking and really want to get a feel for validation, feel for like what this is, how things are going to work in production. Whereas there's probably a subset of users that are interested in attacking and trying to break things, so we'll create a specific zone for that. I'm thinking once we see Altona reach some stability, we'll take the stable set of clients from that, whether that be a subset or all 4 that are participating at the time. And probably to start, just have EF internally spin up a handful of nodes, validators, and run a testnet that's separate. Put out some specific bounties, just try to get our feet wet and see if people are interested. We can also attack these, which I think would be fun. From there, I kind of get it up quickly, fail quickly, see what's up, and iterate. Obviously, we can bring in client teams to manage these things as well, but I figure, at least to start, not bringing in client teams and putting the extra burden on them would be probably the way to go. This is just generally an update. Does anybody have thoughts or questions on this? The idea is probably next 2 weeks have something up, have it publicized, have some small to reasonable sized bounties for some particular things, and see if anyone gets involved.
Quick question. For the attack net, are you looking for a client to support certain RPC endpoint, for example, double propose, double attest? And if yes, is there a spec or a standard for that?
Right now there's not, and opening up these RPC endpoints is potentially dangerous. Obviously, if you keep them in like a isolated debug zone that don't reach mainnet, that's okay. But I imagine that the first attack nets that we put up, we might not even make deposits available to really isolate the scope, so that we run all validators and the scope of attacks are more things like DOS and other things that aren't related to consensus messages, just to keep the complexity reduced. I think over time, I'd like to open up deposits on these types of things, but I also am happy to put the burden of making bad messages on the attacker.
Right, so one other idea for attack nets was to gradually release sets of keys to parties who would like to attack. So at first, the network can only really be attacked from like a network level, but then as this network grows, you will see more higher and higher levels of like degradation on consensus level and see if it falls over.
Right. Okay, cool. Like I said, we're going to try to handle most of the complexity there rather than adding another burden to the client team's plate. But I will keep you all informed. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions and stuff we will ask as we go along. Okay. Moving on to client updates. Let's start with Prismatic.
Hey guys, been a pretty good 2 weeks. So we completed an audit from Constamp. They found a lot of really great stuff. We've been focusing on kind of cleaning all of those up and really just patching up all the serious vulnerabilities that they found. Onyx testing has been pretty stable. So there's 20,000 validators. We only control 15%, and the metrics are pretty good. So now memory has been really nice. Prism nodes don't use more than 1.5 gigabytes with default flags, and we're further optimizing that. I think it definitely correlates with kind of higher peer counts. So we're trying to fix a lot of that, and we've been working on also improving Slasher. So Slasher is using basically flat maps for tracking the historical detection and kind of like the epoch span. So that's been really nice. It's improved the disk IO significantly and make it a lot more bearable to run. And now we're able to catch a lot of slashings that have occurred on the Onyx testnet. And we're also working on kind of planning a validator accounts revamp, following the discussions around the EIP standard for the key store and just what the other clients are planning. So we've been really tackling that aspect. Yeah, and we've been also focusing on helping stream duties to be able to better handle reorg situations. So that's going to likely help out in situations where network might not be doing too well and we don't want people to be complaining. So yeah, overall, that's pretty much it. Just excited for Altona, seeing, hoping to see what's coming next.
Great. Thank you. And congrats on getting through that first audit. Trinity.
Hey, Grant here. Some things we've been working on. We've gotten the beacon chain components up to date with spec version 0.11.3. That's from version 0.9.4. And we're also getting up to date with 0.12.1. I think we're mostly done with that. Alex is working on some preliminary refactoring before getting into fork choice updates. And I'm working on getting the beacon node wired up so that it can sync with other nodes. Once we get those things done, then we're going to try and connect to Altona. But we're anticipating some performance issues, which we'll then have to resolve. So that's it.
Cool. Thanks, Grant. Teku.
Hi, everyone. So we replaced the blocking code in network RPC with like non-blocking code. Started adoption of supranational blast DLS library. We also limited the number of blocks we keep in memory because that was always an issue for us, like managing memory during non-finalization periods. We refactored fork choice management and started work on improving efficiency of storage. And lastly, we merged our 12.1 branch to master in preparation for supporting Altona as our default network. That's it.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. Lighthouse.
Hey, so we've been focusing on preparing for Altona, just syncing Prism and Teku and all the different nodes we could find to make sure things go smoothly. In the past 2 weeks, we landed spec version 12. It's pretty much ready for merge. We're running it on our own testnets quite well. We landed a rewrite of our DISV5 library that uses orders of magnitude less CPU, which is great. we landed a refactor of fork choice, which basically covers all the fork choice for us above the proto array. So it's nice to have that. We're upgrading our peer management and adding a scoring system in there. We're planning an authentication scheme for the validator UI so that the validator client knows that the UI is authorized to talk to it, and the UI knows that it's getting messages from the canonical VC, the validator client that is. We're adding atomicity to our database to prevent consistency. And then the next steps for us is we're going to start integrating the new BLAST BLS library. We're going to implement it with a fallback to Milagro for ARM. We're going to implement the standard API. We're going to start implementing an API on the VC. We're going to start a slasher. Going to revisit our key management too. And hopefully we can start doing more analysis and less feature jamming. That's it from us.
Cool. Thanks, Paul. Nethermind.
Hey, I spent last week mainly improving the performance of the deposit processing and validators creation on started with the beacon node. So I think comparing with other clients, we were somewhere at the level of pre-processing at the beginning. And obviously a lot of more work waiting, especially around the peering and finalizing all the latest spec updates. We're working on this now.
Great, thank you. Lodestar.
Hey, so we've been mostly working on 0.12 updates. We're there, except for Gossip Sub, and we're about 85% there on Gossip Sub, few little features remaining. We're probably not going to be ready for Altona Genesis, but that's kind of our near-term goal is to be testnet ready. We're still not confident that we can reliably sync and transition over to Gossip. So there's still some more work to be done there, debugging. We have a new team member that is on part-time, so that should help us move a little bit faster. And we, upcoming, we're going to be rewriting our validator CLI with some of the feedback that we had in the key management call a few weeks ago. That's it.
Cool, thanks, Cameron. And Nimbus.
Hi. So like everyone, we're getting ready for Altona. This comes with perf improvement. In particular, we had an issue with startup and reloading times, especially after a long-running node, and it has been improved by about 20 to 100x. This was due to uselessly checking crypto keys, in particular when reloading. We had memory leaks improvement. A backward sync now is faster than forward sync. We also fixed bugs that were detected by beacon fuzz. Some progress on the validator split. We have an ongoing reevaluation of the BLS backends because our backend is now a bit more than a year old in terms of Milagro, and we are evaluating between Milagro, Miracle, which was made Apache last month, and that has a lot of hash to curve optimization, BLST and Hermes. And we also switched to 12.1 by default when we build Nimbus. On the networking side, progress on noise, Gossip Sub, Disk V5, and also introducing metrics for Disk V5. On the testnet side, we can finalize on Onyx, the Onyx testnet. And we also had in the past testnet 0 and testnet 1 with permanent nodes. And we will be dedicating the nodes for testnet 1 to the Witty testnet and Altona on launch. And that's it for me.
Great. Thank you. Moving on to research updates. Does anybody have anything for us?
I can share some stuff about the weak subjectivity period discussion.
Yes, please.
So I'm working on a doc that recommends how weak subjectivity checkpoints are handled by clients. And the gist is that new nodes that start up after Genesis, for safety reasons, we want them to be syncing starting from a more recent state than Genesis. And after some calculation, this recent period comes out to be around 14 days. So come deployment time, it's going to be a very standard thing in the client workflows to release these checkpoint states and distribute them to new clients, probably every 7-10 days or something like that. And I think we need more discussion on how these checkpoint states are to be distributed, whether it's in the client code base or some endpoint, P2P or otherwise. So I guess I'll share the doc in the ETH R&D Discord, and we can probably discuss there, and then maybe discuss some more in the next call.
Cool, thanks. So it's a mix between getting the security right and a UX problem also. But I've checked out the doc. It's really great. Thanks, Aditya, and get that to y'all soon. Carl, where do we stand on key stores, EIPs, standardization, things like that? I know y'all had a call last week. Anything to share following that?
Yeah, we had a concurrent call.
You sound very far away from your mic. You might be using your computer mic instead of your headphones or something.
Is that clearer?
Way, way better. We had this issue,
Okay,
I think,
great.
on a call the other day, so maybe it was set like that as well. But thank you.
I see. Great. Yeah, so much clearer on that front. The lots of new things discussed. Obviously, due to time, trying not to push too many of these things through that aren't necessary, and not targeting the new testnet for now. Altona, specifically the changes that have been made. EIP 2333 has a breaking change, which is how you derive the keys. It now matches BLSV2 key derivation, as in how do you take IKM and map it to the key. And then there have been changes to the other EIPs, the paths. I've relaxed the requirements on where you need to store your paths or which paths you have to use for signing and withdrawal keys. Not that you can just choose anywhere, but if you can't use the path specified in the EIP for whatever reason, then you may use your own. But you should try follow the paths recommended to what is a reasonable extent. And then the final thing is on the key store front, written some stuff up on how to handle Unicode passwords. It uses the same mechanisms that are used already in the mnemonic generation if you use passwords in the mnemonic. So you already should have those dependencies if you're doing the mnemonic from scratch, if you're written an implementation from scratch. So there shouldn't be anything added there from a Unicode standpoint. And also there's now a description field because that was requested to help users or validators clarify exactly what all the key stores are for. And yeah, those are the updates on that front.
Awesome. And in terms of key stores versus wallets being what clients are considering, was there any agreement on this? And is there room for a standard around this to exist?
So what came out of the call was basically that key stores are the minimum that should be supported by all clients. And trying to restrict beyond that's probably not wise. We should rather let more standards evolve with time. So for now, everyone that was on the call at least agreed that 2335 style key stores should be the standard for exchanging and storing keys. At least at a minimum, and then stuff on top of that can be built. In terms of standards, it would be I would like to maybe add something to the Eth2 specs, which is in a similar vein to honest validators, and basically just explains what is expected as a minimum. Not that you're required to implement this to be compliant with the specs, but this seems to be what is done at a minimum. That I think would be a good approach, just pointing to these standards. There were also some discussions as to how to lay out these key stores, the folders that they should be located in, but all of that is fairly simple, but it would be good to have a description of that. And I think that would be a good place to put it.
Got it. Cool. Thanks for catching me up, and anyone else. Okay, I know we're kind of in a mix between standards and research, but is any research things that people want to discuss?
And I mentioned this in the other call, but that in post on ETH Research about using GKR to prove hashes much more quickly is something that happened in the last couple of weeks and seems to be really worth following. And basically, kind of the short and medium term relevance is basically looking at witness compression and trying to figure out how to make witnesses faster. And we were looking at polynomial and commitments and Virtual trees for some time, but this could end up making the Snark or Stark Merkle proofs route considerably more efficient again.
Right, more efficient than the other methods described, or just
I
more
think so.
like at parity? Okay.
I think so. In terms of data size, that's definitely more efficient. Like Virtual trees have an overhead of depending on what you do, like seems to be about 100 bytes per object you're proving. This would have like fully like minimum size, like zero overhead witnesses.
I mean, like what we have to keep in mind though, what it doesn't solve is the security problem with like using algebraic hash function or arithmetic hash functions. Yeah. And I think that's actually currently the major stumbling block for witness compression, at least in my.
That's.
So it's like, I'm not sure if this really, I mean, I don't know. I still don't understand how much it really brings. I don't know if there's any reference implementation that would be interesting to know. But like my impression is that it might not make a major difference on the timeline, which seems to be like 3 to 5 years-ish anyway on witness compression. I don't know if you.
That's definitely possible. And it might mean something like there are also kind of options in the middle, like using Pedersen hashes for the Merkle tree and so forth.
Yeah, so that would be an option to do Pedersen instead.
Yeah.
Right. Does it apply to Pedersen in the same way? I guess it's also.
There was like a section in the thread about it, but I'm.
Can you drop that Eth Research post in the chat? Or somebody.
I'll drop it in the Telegram 1 second.
Thanks. Thanks, Ben. Ben dropped it. Thanks, Vitalik.
Yeah, there's a spurious bracket at the end, so ignore that. Sorry.
Okay. Other items. Leo, you had unmuted. Do you have anything to share?
Yeah, just a quick note to mention that we're starting the evaluation on Gossip Sub, and we are evaluating the different types of attacks. And yeah, so we will be releasing, showing, posting out our results in the URL that I'm just posting right now in the chat. But now with the Eth2.0, it would be good if also, clients kind of approach us to ask us for different types of weird things that they see in the network, so that we can also look into different things beyond of what has already been done in the past regarding Gossip Sub.
Got it. Yeah, so just some context. Leo and a master student candidate are doing a deeper investigation of Gossip Sub attacks, hopefully extending to the research that was recently done by Protocol Labs. So yeah, if you have some types of attacks or some particular areas of Gossip Sub that you're concerned about, be good to get in touch with Leo. And thanks for sharing the repo.
Thanks.
Joseph?
Hey, yeah. So TXRX this past 2 weeks, we've worked on validator de-anonymization, and you can see that right up on ETH Research. Johnny wrote a series of, or he's been writing a series called Packetology, and the first one is about kind of de-anonymizing validators, and this is kind of like the I'd say just kind of the rough draft approach, and he's been able to de-anonymize or essentially connect a IP address to public key. And we're also working on a phase 1 client using some of the research from Alex's Anatol's transpiler for the PySpec. And that's it.
Thank you. Other research items before we move on. Great. Okay, networking, open discussion, but we'll start with these items that Proto dropped. Firstly, Raul mentioned on an issue, Raul from Prismatic mentioned on an issue in the specs repo that we're in spec currently supporting Snappy and non-Snappy. Specifically, non-Snappy was removed from Gossip, but both are still supported on the request response domain. Actually, when we were when we removed interop, I did notice that this was not kind of under interop and was implied to be for mainnet. But does anybody have a strong use case for leaving non-snappy request response support? Does anybody remember why we had intended to support both from the beginning?
I don't think we ever intended to support it. It was merely so that clients would have time to implement snappy support.
Right.
We left it in.
Because in Gossip, it was kind of both were stated as, interop was stated as non-snappy, mainnet was stated as snappy, whereas for request response, it just kind of had both, and not a distinction. So I thought maybe our intention was to support both. I don't see a reason to not remove the non-snappy, but waiting for someone to say if they have a reason, like plain text debugging or something like that. I'm not sure.
So basically, even if we remove it, clients can keep support for it if they want, and it doesn't really matter.
Right.
But
Thanks,
I'd also add that like we haven't really run any numbers on Snappy for blocks. I mean,
yeah, you're right.
Everybody has the feeling that like it's kind of a nice thing, but it's we put a finger up in the air and felt which way the wind was blowing, but we haven't really investigated.
Yeah, there's enough zeros in those blocks that we have relative confidence, but you're right. Maybe let's do a.
So for compression, one argument is the attestation format, which is still on bit fields, even though on the subnets there's only really one bit set. So that compresses really well.
Well, yeah, but like then you could argue that if we move to quick later on, that'll also compress it. There's like several layers you could potentially compress that. But all I'm saying is like we should perhaps just look at the numbers once and see like whether they're
Sandy, check it.
Yeah, exactly. Because if the difference is like 50 bytes, then you might wonder whether it's per attestation. Say you might wonder whether it's really worth it because it still fits within a single MTU frame on a normal network. So the benefit is then like negligible. Whereas if it's significant, then obviously we should be doing
it. You mentioned Quick. Does Quick have? You seem to imply that Quick has compression built in. Is that the case?
Actually, I'm not sure on that one. They have encryption, but now that you mention it, I don't remember if they also threw compression in there. I mean, it's a layered format, so they have like onions that you can add to it. But
right.
All right, no, let me take that back.
It's fine. I just I hadn't heard of that, but I also am not a Quick expert. Okay. I'd say action item is run Sandy, check compression numbers on single user attestation, relatively full attestations, and then a series of different blocks, and just Sandy check that we're seeing reasonable compression ratios. And if we are, I see no reason not to remove the non-snappy from request response, and again, it already is removed from the gossip. Okay. Does anybody want to raise their hand and run some quick compression numbers? Yeah, okay, that's right. We'll get to this. Leo raised his hand. Are you raising your hand to run compression numbers, or are you raising your hand to say something?
Yeah. I would be interested to take a look into that.
Yeah, cool. The easiest way would probably be to pick a client, open up whatever they're using for testing and simulations, and just produce some objects and go from there.
Yeah, I think we can try that. Who should I follow up with this after the call?
There is an open issue on the specs repo, a recent issue. I'll drop it in the chat, in which the suggestion to remove non-snappy was made, and we can add the numbers there.
Okay, I will take a look into that.
Thank you very much. Okay. Let me pull up my list again. Yamix support. From what I can tell, it looks like not everyone supports Yamix. This is like the advanced, presumably better and more advanced multiplexer. I've only that is hearsay. I can't qualify that with data or an explanation. But I think there were potentially some issues between Lighthouse and Prism Yamix support, which, I don't know. That's the state of things. Does anybody have any follow-up on that? I think the easy thing is for Lighthouse to keep Yamix disabled until we can debug it, but otherwise, anything else to discuss here?
That's the state of affairs as far as I know.
Yeah, okay.
On that note, while we were testing noise in Witty, it was kind of hard to find nodes to connect to because the spec has changed, the noise spec itself. So many clients were running probably an older version of the spec. Just a straw poll, like, has everybody updated to the latest one?
I don't know. Sorry, that'd be an Adrian question.
A follow-up is this is the noise spec currently being versioned? And if so, we should probably point to a specific version.
I'm not sure, actually. I just know that between our first implementation and our second look at it, it changed significantly. They removed some framing and stuff. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's worth taking it to the networking channel so we can get Adrian's input. I do know that we can't speak noise with Prism at this point, but I don't know why.
Yeah, indeed, right. It was really hard to connect to people with noise, except some clients. I don't have the details of which clients work, but it doesn't really matter. What's
everyone still
highlighting is
falling back to SecIO? Is the network primarily running on SecIO right now?
I'd say yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, on our end, it's running on TechIO.
Yeah, and the thing was that we're preparing for our audits, and ideally we wanted to disable SecIO completely. We don't want that surface, but obviously that's not doable now in order for general client compatibility.
Let's take this to the networking channel. First of all, I think we need to figure out if the updates they're making to the noise spec are versioned, which very likely could not be, which we should push for some versioning there, so that we can more easily conform. As for, I would imagine Prismatic's Go implementation, if any, has the most up-to-date versions, but I could be wrong there. But let's just get some info. I would really like to not have SecIO enabled in the new domain net. So let's work through it. Thanks, Joseph.
Well, it was very lonely out there with noise.
It's easy to, it's easy to come to conformance though with yourself if you can't hear anyone else.
That's true.
Yeah, infinitely secure too.
Okay, I think we addressed those 3 points. Are there other networking things you want to discuss right now?
Yeah, I have a quick question to ask the group. In the spec, in the networking spec, there's a maximum clock disparity parameter that has like a note in there that basically mentions that it's set to 500 milliseconds kind of tentatively until the numbers can be verified on the test net. Does anyone have an idea of like what sort of verification we're looking to do? Like how do we want to validate that number?
I know that one of the tweaks we did in order to improve our Witty performance was to increase that number.
Okay, so
but that's purely how do you say, non-researchy, anecdotal. There we go. Thank you.
It was what? Sorry, I missed that.
Anecdotal, meaning they changed the parameter and things seem to work better, but there's not much.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So, so basically, what you think you're seeing is that there were packets, or sorry, there were like maybe blocks or attestations that were arriving sooner than expected, and when you lowered that number, you weren't ignoring them.
Yeah, exactly. Because when validating packets for Gossip Sub, one of the criteria is that the packet is not too recent with regards to your local clock. And if we, like, there's two ways to handle that. You can queue the packet up, or perhaps you can
Or
be
just
more
ignore
tolerant
it.
on the clock.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to build the queue, so we just became a little bit more tolerant on the clock, and that helped. But obviously, like,
build the queue.
The queue. Well, yeah, the queue is the better solution, but then you need to like protect that queue against abuse in the sense that
Yes,
you know.
but it's also the larger we make that number, the more validators, malicious validators, can try to exploit it. The more play they have in timing attacks and things.
So I took a look at the, at the numbers just when I was listening for blocks, and my code was agnostic, to the clock disparity. Like, it would just accept it. Obviously, like, I didn't see anything that came in earlier than 500 milliseconds, but obviously everyone else is respecting that. So I guess it didn't surprise me, but it didn't really seem like compelling evidence that it was valid either. I can maybe open an issue and just throw that chart in there, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Are there any other constants lurking like that? I probably need to do a pass on, like, let's evaluate this later. I know that's...
Yeah, I'll scan through it too. That's a good question.
Okay, thanks, Johnny. Other networking items? Okay. Any spec discussion outside of networking? Great. And anything anyone wants to talk about? Cool. I hope someone was taking good notes because we have a bunch of little follow-ups.
Yeah, I've got all your actions highlighted.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben. Okay, I hope you all have a great day and a great weekend, and that Altona launches very successfully on Monday. Let's shore up, hop in the Altona channel right now. We can shore up a Genesis offset, or tune that Genesis time. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.